Hey, my name's Herbert. Who the hell are you?
I am Joy Beckerman-Maher.
Really? What do you do?
I'm an industrial hemp professional and a public relations consultant and an activist. We're going on 20 plus years now.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
What do you activize?
Industrial hemp, women's rights, and industrial hemp.
Really?
Yes.
I guess you got your priorities in order, don't you?
I do indeed, sir. I do indeed.
Okay, so are you with Normal?
I am. I'm with Normal and the Normal Women's Alliance. And the Normal Women's Alliance is an organization just sort of sprouting out of Normal. We just got our own tax ID number, but we are for sure with the Normal agenda. I love the fact that it's the Women's Alliance. That's what drove me to it. It called to me like a siren, because when women are forming an alliance, the healing of the nations is taking place.
Really?
So I hitched my giddy up with them.
Okay, so what sort of activities do you guys do? You just go around educating people about...
Part of it, absolutely, that's part of it, but what is even more exciting is actually writing proposed legislation and amendments and working directly with local, state, and federal government officials and politicians. Hi, Bailey. And we actually do have Senator Caldwell's ear, who's in charge here of I-502, and work directly with her.
Okay, so you're trying not to be criminals anymore.
Yes, thank you. Trying not to be criminals anymore, especially as a mother. Matter of fact, you might see here on our banner, moms doing what comes naturally. And I, in fact, did have 2 home births, one in '92, one in '94, in the state of New York, where midwifery, even today, remains illegal.
Really?
Yes, but you go one state over in Vermont, and it's midwifery is a thriving, booming, legal, encouraged, actually, business, because it's much less expensive for the state for a woman to have a home birth with an educated, licensed midwife than it is to have a baby in a hospital, which is also, sadly, a very dangerous place to have a baby. Hospitals are filled with disease, can you imagine? And if, God forbid, you're taking too long and they need your bed, you know, those forceps are going to come out, and that Pitocin will be shot right in you, and that baby's coming out because they need that bed, turn that room over. And, you know, in your own home, as long as you're healthy, you could have a home birth and you're not an at-risk pregnancy, and there are very many reasons why a woman might have an at-risk pregnancy. But other than that, you can absolutely have a baby at home. We've actually been doing it for thousands and thousands of years, long before hospitals.
So, weren't you worried about hemorrhaging? What happened?
Thank you for asking, sir. And that is all about doing a responsible home birth. Number one, you want to at least have the nearby hospital informed that you're going to be having a home birth in case you need to go there. And the other is what happens if you hemorrhage. So my midwives in New York used bottled chlorophyll, and that is how I learned that the chlorophyll molecule and the human hemoglobin molecule is basically one property off. The only difference between chlorophyll and human hemoglobin is the iron. Is the element of iron. And so if I were to have hemorrhaged, we went to the natural food store and we bought a bunch of supplies that you needed, but a big bottle of liquid chlorophyll, and if I were to hemorrhage, they would literally have me drink liquid chlorophyll.
Really? And they were taking care of it?
According to them, and they were very wise women, by the way, who also worked with doctors who were part of their underground network, doctors who encouraged and supported in upstate New York at that time home birth.
Underground child birth?
Yes. Exactly.
That sounds like a criminal enterprise right there.
I know. In fact, it was, and it was sad. My midwives had to literally, back then there weren't so many cell phones, but there were pagers and beepers, you might remember, and they had to run their operations through a beeper. Any medical records that they kept were kept outside of their home, because I had, again, the babies in '92 and '94, and that was just on the heels of basically a midwifery witch hunt that had gone on by the state of New York, and criminal charges filed against basically my midwife's mentor and inspiration. And so they had to behave like drug dealers. They were basically involved in the black market, and they certainly were not making money doing this. I mean, we did pay them, but a very small amount.
Yeah, people don't seem to understand that there's risk and reward, and a lot of people involved in doing things that they love are doing them essentially as much because they love them, because there's money to be made in doing it.
Absolutely. No, it is a labor of love, no pun intended. I'm sure my midwives would love to hear that. It's a labor of love.
Any good stories about...
Got some great ones. 2 are that, of course, during this time when I was pregnant and having babies, well, basically, the more money you have, the less questionnaires there are to fill out. So if you have any type of state assistance giving birth, you're going to have a ton of questionnaires from the Bureau of Vital Statistics, because the government wants to sort of mine data from any warm body that they can mine data from, and people who are reliant on the system are great data mines. So I filled out a lot of Bureau of Vital Statistics questionnaires during that time, and I answered every single one honestly. I wanted it to be on the record that during both of my healthy and inspired pregnancies, I was using cannabis daily. I did not, when I did even remotely have experienced morning sickness, it was just an instant cure. I couldn't imagine. And I have friends who morning sickness literally puts them down. They're on their back for months at a time, and I just cannot believe that they wouldn't use cannabis because of just being victims of so much propaganda, and that they would rather literally be on their backs, which is unhealthy, to just be sedentary during a pregnancy. So that's one story. And just a quick little side note of that is that there have been very few real studies, scientific research studies, done on pregnancy and marijuana smoking. Here in the United States, all such studies are done on high-risk drug addicted, methamphetamine, cocaine addicted mothers who may or may not also be using marijuana. So, and most of the studies here are that way. They go for hard drug addiction sort of populations that also may at one time have smoked marijuana, and then they say, oh, marijuana is the gateway drug, or marijuana causes this and that in pregnancy and childhood, when in fact they're using very unhealthy bodies. In Jamaica, which is really the only true bona fide study that's gone on, in Jamaica there is a population of women that are only using cannabis. They're not even using caffeine. They're very pure bodies, and they are discovered that more advanced motor skills. Now, I don't want to sit here and be a proponent and saying you'll have a healthier baby if you use cannabis, but what I will say is that the scientific data sort of kind of demonstrates that, and I can certainly tell you that both of my children were football stars, National Honor Society, DECA leadership, every kind of extracurricular activity you could believe in, and they're both now full-time college students. So that's what cannabis has done for us. I've been smoking daily for over a quarter of a century. Another interesting story that happened in New York is that after I had my first baby, Phoenix Rising, I was in a mall breastfeeding. It was like the Albany Mall, there's only one. And he was in a front sack, and I was just walking around breastfeeding, and mall security came up to me and said that I couldn't do that in public. I need to go into the restroom because I was offending some women, which just totally shocked me that it was women that were offended by my breastfeeding, to the extent that they would report me to the security. Well, of course, I was even more ballsy back then than I am now, and just thought that was absolutely hilarious and offensive. And I said to him that I was equally offended by fake boobs, high heels, and makeup, but that I certainly wouldn't make a big stink about this offense, how these other women were offending me, and I would never call security on them. And at that point, I in fact moved Phoenix Rising over just a little bit and just held that bare, huge, milk-filled breast just naked so everyone could see, including the security guard, and said, I'm going into the shoe store. I remember this. I'm going into that shoe store over there. If anyone continues to have a problem with this, you can find me in the shoe store. And so I've had to, and actually because of that, my midwife and I ended up on a radio show, and I think it might have even been at SUNY Albany, State University of New York, Albany, which has a pretty radical radio station. So we were able to do that work together. And it was fascinating. It was a fascinating little experience having home births where it's illegal in New York, and where apparently women are offended by public breastfeeding.
What was your name again?
Joy Beckerman Maher. You can find me on hempace.com because I'm the hemp ace. Yes. Thank you, Herbert.